Welcome to the Back to Me podcast, where we help multicultural incoming freshman women and men manage their entire college experience throughout post-graduation to successfully transition into entrepreneurship and corporate workspaces as new hires.
Back to me. Oh, I turned it around. I'm back to me. I finally figured it out. I'm back to me. So when you think you have nothing, back to me. I go back to me. Yeah, I'm back to me.
Hello, everyone. It's your host, Yoli Tamu. Let There Be Peace on Earth and Let It Begin With Me is a song lyric that is not only appropriate for the holiday season, but it is a mantra that you should consider adopting for yourself. In this week's episode, we discuss the path to accessing internal happiness with Roni Habib, the founder of EQ Schools. In his new book, Happy and Resilient, Mr. Habib encourages you to tap into all of your emotions, both negative and positive, so you can develop resilience and self-compassion. Now, through the 5 elements of his book, learn how to master the art of positive psychology. Enjoy. I had the opportunity to go to a conference that's considered the SAL conference of all conferences, the MTSS conference. And I was so fortunate to meet our keynote speaker that day. He's with us. And what an opportunity we have to hear from him. Welcome, Roni. How's it going?
Yoli, thank you so much for having me with you. It's going great. I'm really honored to be with you. And thanks for, putting together this amazing podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, I tell you all the time that I'm so grateful. And I mean, you're the busy guy. You're the keynote speaker and you're here with us. How about it?
I know. I'm excited to be here.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So on this podcast, we serve that college freshman that's dealing with anxiety, transitioning into a new environment, as well as the college graduate heading out into the workforce. So, both people are suffering from transition and anxiety and fear of letting people know, that they're nervous. And so when I met you, your keynote was so full of joy and it was very disarming for all of us to just be human, relax, embrace joy. And I was like, wow, so much can be happening in life, but I can sit here in this moment and feel joy. And I thought that was powerful that you can do that.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. And so the fact that you serve students, they're getting you up close and personal. And so I wanted to get an idea of how you started and, where did it all begin for you? How were you inspired in your personal life? Did you deal with anxiety? I mean, where does this all start?
I love that you asked that. So my story, it's actually interesting, because I did, especially during those years of being a college freshman and then, graduating from college and, getting into the workforce, I definitely dealt with anxiety, and, kind of like the fear of, are people going to, believe in me? Like, I have to fake it till I make it and all of that. In fact, I had amazing grades in college and I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great. People are going to want to hire me right and left. And no one hired me, because it was and like I was worried about, just making it. And I remember, that year, interestingly, I actually had pretty intense surgery, a pituitary tumor, and I had a surgery and I had to actually really like lay down for a month, like in bed afterward to recover. And in that month, I realized that life is too short to not do what you really are meant to do and what your heart really desires, right? And what your heart kind of points you to. And I realized that what I really wanted to be is a teacher. And even though it was very unpopular in terms of like a path, right? Because it wasn't lucrative and all of that. And I ended up like actually really slowing down enough and realizing, yes, this is going against the grain and against maybe what a lot of people would choose for me or want me to do, but it's just what my heart calls me to do. And interestingly enough, I think it's Paulo Coelho who has this quote, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but basically it's, a man's person's only obligation is to follow their life's dream, and once they do that, the universe conspires to support them in that, right? And I decided to apply that year to Harvard, of all places. to learn to become a teacher and, to get a master's of education. And I mean, I, didn't at all think that I would get in, but I was like, let's just try it and see what happens. And lo and behold, I got in, and really kind of launched me into this career. But I'll tell you, one of the things that really propelled me to delve into teaching students and teaching adults, teachers and even leaders, right, like superintendents and CEOs and all that, about emotional intelligence is actually a tragedy I experienced as a teacher myself. So by about my 5th year of teaching, I remember getting to school one day and I parked my car, get out of my car, and before I get to my classroom, the intercom goes off and he tells us we have the emergency staff meeting. So I go sit in the choir room, I wait to hear what's going on. And before, I even sit down, the principal comes in and tells us that one of our students committed suicide. And when she said the name, Yoli, like, it was my student. And that moment broke me. It was hard to move. I was shot, like, physically hard to move. But he did it in a very public way. He did it with the train. And we had to, get on top of rumors and, go support the kids, right? And as an educator, that's just what you do. You put yourself aside and you go support the students. And we all did that for a day. And at the end of the day, his mother reached out to me and asked me to speak in his funeral, which, of course, I said yes to. Hardest thing I ever had to do professionally. And I go to the church, that day, Yoli, and I remember I'm sitting in the first row and I see the mom speak about her child and I'm starting to cry. And then I see the dad speak about him and I totally lose my shit. You know what I mean? It's just so hard, And then I go up to the podium because it's my turn to go out and speak, put myself together real quick. And I shared what I shared. And at the end of my speech, I don't know if this ever happened to you or your listeners, but I'm telling you, I literally had a voice channel through me that told me if I'm going to continue to be an educator, there was nothing that was going to stop me from putting my students' well-being first. Nothing, no matter what I taught. And I told myself, why not? I want to teach them how to be well, but honestly, Yoli, I was not well, And Yoli, you know how students can smell bullshit from a mile away?
Yes.
Right. And adults too. And so I needed to get right and get well myself. As I saw therapists, started mindfulness practices in earnest in my life, really used positive psychology principle in my life. In a matter of 4 or 5 months, transformed. I had more energy. I was more connected to my purpose. I was more excited to go to work. I was more innovative. It's funny, my students thought I was on drugs, but I wasn't. You know what I mean? It was just worked.
Mm-hmm.
I asked myself, okay, if I have these skills as an adult, why are we not giving these skills to kids, right?
Yeah. So
I decided to create this course, Positive Psychology, and I was praying 25 students would sign up. Turned out 107 signed up, which blew me away. I just was like, wow, And I taught this course for 4 years. I've seen hundreds of kids behaviorally shift in front of my eyes, students. And so then I decided, okay, I'm going to start training other educators to do it, K through 16, right? And it was just amazing to see, kindergarten teachers using some of the tools that I taught them and it working so well in their classroom. And then professors, right? 4-year universities and in community colleges use their stuff in their school and everywhere in between, high school, middle school, elementary school. And it's been an amazing, beautiful journey in the last now decade of doing this work. And really, the idea here is really what we're doing is me and my team, when we go out and speak, is we help people thrive so that organizations thrive. But it starts at a very human level. So
very much so. Like I said, that's what connected me. You just made us all human when you spoke.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I was hugging all kinds of people all around me.
That's
what's going on.
Love that. And that's a big thing of what I do. When I come, I'm like, hey, we got to be, because it's the sit and get model of presentation is just too boring. It's too boring and people can't really even learn that well. You know what I mean? We're humans at our core. We want to move. We want to connect. And so coming in and just having fun, right? Remembering, let's be joyful. And let's take a moment, play together and hug one another and see how good that emotional resonance feels with another person. And that's what bonds people. That's what starts to lead people to feel psychological safety with one another, right? And then build trust and all those beautiful things that can happen once that's there. So,
Well, I mean, this world needs you desperately. Our politicians need you.
I know, right?
It's a mess, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
When you mentioned positive psychology, I know there's a connection to SEL, social emotional learning. I don't know. I assume that that's another way of saying social emotional learning through positive psychology. Would you say?
Yeah, I'll draw the connection for you. So Daniel Goleman coined the term emotional intelligence. Essentially, he's the person who kind of, made it a little bit more mainstream, if you will. And he really names four main competencies in there: self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, and relationship management. And positive psychology is another field. However, there's a lot of kind of overlap between the two, right? So, for example, within positive psychology, there's a lot of research around the field of mindfulness, okay? And mindfulness is really the basis for the four emotional intelligence competencies, right? Like you can't be self-aware if you're not mindful, if you're not present, if you're not here. Now, there's a whole bunch of other kind of concepts, right, and skills and tools that positive psychology focuses on that are beyond emotional intelligence, but they're all interconnected. So in my book, Happy and Resilient, the complete guide to joyful teaching, learning, and living, I put together basically, I break it down into 6 chapters, and 5 of those chapters represent the model that I call RAMP. I created an acronym called RAMP, and RAMP are the 5 elements that contribute to everyone's well-being. And the R stands for relationships, having supportive relationships in our lives. The first A stands for awareness, being present, being here. The second A is advancement, personal growth, continuing to follow in passion. M stands for meaning, really being connected to our purpose. Why am I here? Who's important to me? How am I important to others? And then P stands for positive emotions. Ideally, we want to experience at least a ratio of 3-to-1 positive emotions to difficult emotions in our lives, as that allows us to thrive even more. Notice the ratio is not 3-to-0, meaning we absolutely need to experience some difficult emotions because we're human and that's okay. And actually, the more we welcome them, the easier life becomes. And so with EQ schools, when I come in and I work with organizations, I bring in concepts from positive psychology, from the emotional intelligence field, and of course, rooted underneath all of that is mindfulness work. So,
Very powerful. Good stuff. Ramp. Okay. So now with your programs in schools, you teach positive psychology, or I see that you have a program called SEL Wellness. Can you tell us about that and how do you serve students in that way?
yeah, for sure. So what we like to do is we go into a school. So it could be a college, it could also be a K through 12 school. But with colleges, and I'll speak to that because this is kind of what we're talking about here. What we like to do is to come in and just kind of first observe what's going on at the college, right? And like do a little bit of like, you call it just surveying, like, how skilled are students with SEL skills, self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, relationship management? How connected are students? By the way, how connected are the faculty? And how connected are the faculty to the students, right? Like these different things that we kind of measure and look and see so that we know, okay, like here are actually the strength of the organization, because, organizations do have strengths. And here are the weaknesses, and here are the things that really we need to like tackle and get into, right? And then after that, what we do is we work with a guiding coalition at the organization to kind of define what does thriving look like for your organization? What does it mean? What's the goal? What's the vision? What's the mission? And based on that vision statement, we create objectives, right, that can really speak to would the organization get excited and get behind, And then we come in and we offer super interactive, fun, but very useful, practical, personal and professional development workshops to the students and then also to the faculty, right? So that the students are not just like, oh, this is a one-off, like you're just teaching us. I mean, yes, we're getting value from it, but we don't want to just like have it once and then not see it modeled by the people who are supposed to, teach us and care for us, right?
Right,
And like
raising us.
yeah. And so we do that and really also delve into providing the faculty with very practical tools to continue the work after we leave. You know what I mean? So that the students can feel like, okay, like I'm seen, and there's an emphasis on connection and on all these different skills that are so critical for our well-being.
I'm so glad that you said adults need to be served. There's SEL for adults and all that. But I mean, to really, like you said, observe the adults as well, because there's a lot of terrified educators out here
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
it goes beyond the students. They have just terror of our world, our culture, lots
Totally.
going on.
Absolutely. I mean, it's tough to be an educator right now. Like, I'm not like it just is like and I mean, like the world we live in now is so divided. Our country is so divided, like, and it's so interesting because schools, colleges, in a way, they're kind of like a petri dish for like society. Do you know what I mean? It's like a lot of the stuff that society is kind of dealing with and our country is dealing with kind of gets brought to the surface in schools in many ways. And so, like, educators and leaders are just kind of dealing with it, right? And trying to figure out, okay, like, how do I make sense of this? And then how do I support my students as I'm dealing with, all the stuff that's thrown my way? And it can be very stressful for sure.
That's why I think you're so powerful with just humanizing everybody and bringing everybody together with joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Because I think, Yoli, and I'll just say this and then I'll be quiet, but
No, you're good.
it's like underneath all of it, we really are all just humans, right? Underneath all of it, like the reason we're fighting, the reason, we're not hearing each other and all of that is because we don't have the emotional intelligence skills underneath to be able to have the hard conversations and to remember underneath that we can agree to disagree, we can have conflict and still have our relationship even become stronger, you know? So, yeah.
Emotional intelligence. You hit the nail on the head. We just don't have it. A lot of people don't have the tools.
Right. Exactly.
So when we think about that, I'm thinking about tips or ideas that you can share with our listeners that maybe they can apply to their lives today, trying to navigate society and trying to navigate the college experience as a new transitioning individual. You got some tips for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things I think are important. I'll share a few like concepts and then maybe a few couple skills, right, that they can really get. So the first kind of concept to get is that it's okay to not be okay. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's very stigmatized now that where people are like, oh, if you're not okay, something's wrong with you. And no, it's just like, it's okay to not be okay, period. And if you don't feel well, number one, name that, because whatever you name, you tame. Okay. Whenever you name, you begin to tame. And so if you're saying, like, for example, you feel overwhelmed because it's a whole new environment. You left all your friends, you're like trying to like make a whole bunch of new friends. And you need to go to class and you need to there's a lot going on. It's a difficult transition, And so simply being able to like sit down and take a deep breath and actually breathe in such a way where you're breathing into the count of 4, holding for 4 and breathing out to the count of 8, that exhalation, the elongation of the exhalation stimulates your vagus nerve and allows you to go from a sympathetic to a parasympathetic nervous system. It allows you to downregulate. Okay. So you're calmer. All right. So if you take 5 or 6 of those breaths, you're in a much more regulated place. And from this place of being slightly more regulated, beginning to notice like, hey, what's going on with me right now? I'm scared or, I feel anxious. Okay. A lot of times when people feel anxious or feel stressed, if they slow down enough, they realize, okay, there's fear underneath it. Right. And and then actually beginning to investigate and looking into, okay, where do I feel the fear? Do I feel it in my heart? Do I feel it in my stomach? Do I feel it? Where is it in my body? Because every emotion is tied to a sensation in the body. In fact, the word emotion, it comes from the Latin word emovere, which means energy in motion. And so the reason we call emotions feelings sometimes is because we literally can feel them in the body, literally. And so, for example, am I feeling my fear in my heart or in my neck or in my stomach or my forehead? And actually taking a moment, taking some deep breaths, normalizing it. So after you name it, you normalize it and you're like, wow, I'm feeling fear. Of course I'm feeling fear. And most people in my situation would feel a certain sense of fear, maybe some less, some more, but I'm feeling it because I'm human and there's nothing wrong with me, And then really delving into nurturance. So like learning to become our own best coach, nurturing ourselves as we move through it. So actually taking a moment and sitting down, and maybe if your heart is where you feel the fear, putting both hands on your heart and simply saying, hey, I'm here for you and I'm not leaving you. And I love you for who you are. And even using endearing terms like, sweetie, I'm here for you and I'm not leaving you. And this is a moment of suffering and fear, but guess what? You're not alone. And I am not effing leaving you. Like, we're going to get through this together. And if sweetie is too mushy for some of the listeners, just go with dude, dude, I'm not leaving you.
Girl, I got you.
Yeah, bro, I got me here, And I think that it's interesting because there's a lot of research actually to show that self-compassion in this way is what leads to resiliency. Okay. And a lot of time people think self-compassion is self-pity. It's actually the complete opposite. Self-pity is self-centered. It's like, whoa, me.
Mm-hmm.
Self-compassion is like, I'm no different than anybody else. Like, I'm just saying, like, I'm feeling something right now that most people feel, and it's okay. And I'm not special, but I'm going to love myself through this. I'm going to become my best coach, because through being my best coach, I can be at my best and I can actually show up for others as well. And so I think that that's one really important skill for young adults to have 100%, and for anyone really, but young adults especially as they transition from high school to college and then college to the workforce. Now, the other thing, though, that I think is quite important is to have your kind of like, if possible, have your like go-to people. You know what I'm saying? Like, where it's like one or two, maybe three people you're just like can go to and be completely human and real with them and just be yourself, be like, hey, this is what's really up for me right now. And I just need to not feel alone with it, And I don't even need an answer from you. I don't need you to fix it. I just need to know I'm not alone in this. And hopefully, their friend is able to just sit and really hear them, and love them up through it. I think those things kind of come to mind as the top, most important things. Like, really ask for help. Don't try to do it alone. And when you are alone, really be there for yourself in a really loving way. And then lastly, I'd say, like, don't forget to have fun. Like, especially during those years, like, I remember, like, I'm taking myself back, like when I was 17, I started college, but I turned 18 my first year. And I mean, if I were to give my young self some like advice, I would just say, like, hey, loosen up a little bit more, like, go out and have fun and enjoy it. And through it, it's not going to hurt your academics too much. Like, there's always a balance, right? But by being outward and actually having your mindset kind of broaden and being with other people and playing frisbee or whatever, going out and having fun, that's only going to allow you to be able to feel more grounded and more secure, so that when it's time to learn, like, you can just focus on learning and not worry so much about being alone.
Mm-hmm. This is so good. When you were talking about self-compassion, wow, I mean, things were just shooting off in my head about spirituality. Like, if you're not of that ilk, or if you don't have a spiritual foundation, the fact that you said develop your self-compassion by just speaking to yourself, have you found that that's pretty simple for students to do without making a spiritual connection or searching for something outside of themselves?
That's an awesome question. So here's what I found. Okay, so students who are spiritual or have grown up, in a household where either a religious household or there's, a spiritual one, do have an easier time with it than those who haven't had the experience. Now, that said, those who don't, I found that with a little bit of guidance, that most people can do that relatively well. It's more about accessing kindness, gentleness, like being aware, like recognizing, oh, this is how, like, let's say I was fortunate enough to have a mother who was truly caring and loving, like really delving back into it and being like, oh, this is how this felt. And here's the thing, like, as I'm transitioning from high school to college and I'm becoming a young adult, it's time for me to realize that it's time for me to parent myself, right? Like, yes, most likely still have, if I'm lucky enough, I still have my parents, but in order to thrive in this world, we need to be our own best parents. And then once we're able to do that well, and we're really able to be there for ourselves, then we can begin to show up really powerfully for others, right? Because even in romantic relationships, right? Like as young adults, become partnered with others, people need to understand that even in relationships, people still need parenting in a way, right? Like we're still each other, like not in all realms, but there are realms in the relationship with the partner maybe feel insecure and stuff. And you can actually, be there as a partner, but as this like figure that can really support them well as you're supporting yourself. So I think that that's a critical skill to develop over time.
Yeah, I love that you're saying this because even when you run across students that say, well, I never had both my parents, or I've never had that experience. I don't know what that is, but you know what it's not.
Right.
So what is the opposite? What would the opposite be? You know what I mean?
For sure. And it doesn't have to be from a parent. It could be from a good friend. Like if you have a parent, then okay, do you have a friend who's really like one of those people who just like was able to be there for you? How did they talk to you? Right? Because often we're our worst enemies up here. We have the inner critic in our mind. I sometimes call it the itty bitty shitty committee,
Yes.
where it's like it distorts, our reality, and it distorts like our perception of ourselves. It actually feeds us cognitive distortions. And so a lot of times being able to recognize like, whoa, my best friend would never talk to me this way.
Right.
In the way that I'm talking to myself. Even my enemies don't talk to me this way. And so like learning to be like, oh, let's bring in a kind, gentle, loving voice so I can be the best coach for myself. And by the way, like that is the fastest way we can grow and learn from our mistakes, right? I really believe that. The coach who berates all the time and yells all the time and all of that, like you don't learn nearly as fast from them. It's not that you can never, like that yelling can never happen, but most of it needs to be like, hey, I know that my coach cares about me. So I know that I care about myself. I know that it's there. And for that, I can really thrive.
This was so good. I mean, wow. Wow. We always wrap with these final words of encouragement, but self-compassion, I think, is it. I mean, I think you just hit the nail on the head. So I appreciate you. I'm so grateful that you took the time to be with us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, this has been fantastic. So now if they want to learn more about you and go investigate some of your programs, where would they go?
Yeah, for sure. So you just go to eqschools.com. And then if you ever wanted to talk to me about bringing me to speak to your organization, all you have to do is click on Let's Talk at eqschools.com and you'll get on my calendar and we'll talk about me coming and supporting. And also check out, my book. It's coming out in November. Again, Happy and Resilient, the complete guide to joyful teaching, learning, and living. It's going to be on Amazon, but also on our website, again, eqschools.com. So, and if you want to email me, I'm just Roni at eqschools.com.
All right. Well, congratulations on the book. My goodness.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And listen, I deeply, deeply appreciate you taking the time to have me. I love the work that you do. I think it's so important. And your listeners are so, so lucky that you're putting this together.
Thank you. Hey, we were all there at one point. So it's our time to pay it forward. So I appreciate you. All right. So I'll be in touch with you very soon. You have a great week. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. You as well.
Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us. While having access to a trusted confidant is important, take the time to learn how to nurture yourself as well. For more information about other episodes, remember to subscribe to the Back to Me podcast, College and Beyond. I'm your host, Yoli Tamu. Leave a review at the end of this podcast, and if you would like to learn more about other special events, join the Back to Me podcast Facebook group, or simply text Back to Me to 833-206-4565. Until next time, be well.